Are you looking for a way to organize your life, be more productive and efficient, all while having a beautiful creative outlet? Well, bullet journaling might be the perfect solution you need. A bullet journal is a customizable planning system designed to help you track the past, organize the present, and plan for the future. Hi guys, I'm Anna. I've been sharing my bullet journal on here for the past 2 years, and today I thought it'd be helpful to share all you guys need to know to start your first bullet journal. From supplies, how to set up your very first pages, and how to actually make this system work for you long term. So grab some tea or coffee, get cozy, and let's dive into it. So what is a bullet journal? This is a system that was originally created by writer Carroll and popularized by his blog and his book, which I have right here, The Bullet Journal Method. In his book, writer Carroll talks about how he was struggling to focus and stay on top of his responsibilities, and none of the typical planners were working for him. So he got a blank notebook and made his own system that did work. And that's really what a bullet journal is. It starts off as a blank notebook, and then you fill it with the page formats that work for you and match what your life needs. Whether that's a monthly calendar to keep track of all your meetings and busy schedule, or a place for your daily to-do list, a place to map out bigger projects and their deadlines, habit trackers for any new habits you're trying to form, or a space to remember and reflect like a scrapbook. A bullet journal is a mix between a planner and diary that you create to fit exactly what you need. It can be purely functional, or it can be pretty and aesthetic, or it can be somewhere in between, but it's ultimately what you make of it. So why bullet journal? First, let's talk about why the system works so well. Number one, it improves productivity, and I've seen this in my own life in a number of ways. First, the analog, or AKA pen and paper system, forces you to focus whenever you're writing or planning in your journal without any digital distractions. There's no adding an event to your calendar and then getting distracted by an alert on your phone. And since you're manually writing everything down, that helps with memory and also enforces a stronger commitment to what you're writing. There's been lots of studies to show that handwriting something helps with retention of that information, and also plenty of studies that show when you write a goal down, it improves the likelihood that you'll achieve that goal way more so than if you didn't write it down. Number two, a bullet journal can enhance your organization. It combines all aspects of your life into one centralized system, so you can create spreads for your work, personal goals, everything in this one notebook. And it also has the flexibility to allow you to create spreads that work for you. Not every layout works for the same person, and so this allows you to make a calendar that works for your brain and helps you stay organized. Number three, a journal can also boost mental clarity. Writing things down helps us declutter our mind and feel more in control, and keeping track of your actions and thoughts day after day is a great way to improve self-awareness. It also creates a daily routine that's a great chance to step back from all the digital distractions and spend time internally reflecting and away from all the digital stimulation we get every day. Lastly, bullet journaling is really accessible and customizable. We're going to talk in a second about all the supplies you'll need, but it's really a very minimal startup cost if you want it to be. Of course, you can get fancy with all the stationery, but all you really need is a notebook and pen, and a lot of people already have that at home. And since it's completely customizable, the system can be really simple for beginners, but it can also adapt to become more complex for experienced bullet journalers. Okay, I hope you're feeling excited and motivated to get started, so let's go ahead and talk about the supplies you'll need. Like I said, all you really need to bullet journal is a notebook and a pen. These are the only requirements, but let's go over some specifications you might want to consider when it comes to picking out your notebook. Most bullet journals are dot grid, like this one I have right here, which I find really nice because it makes splitting up the pages into different sections a lot easier. I can just use the grid to guide my lines, and it can make keeping your writing neat a lot easier as well. But you can do whatever works for you. Lined paper or blank paper are options too. You can also think about what size you want. Two of the most common journal sizes are A5 and B5. A5, which is this size right here, is 150 by 210 millimeters, and it's a little more portable, not as bulky. B5 is bigger at 180 millimeters by 250 millimeters, which then of course gives you a lot more room on each page. And the dot grids on each journal, by the way, are pretty uniform as far as how big the squares are. The other biggest thing I look at in journals, especially if you're planning to do some drawing or using a lot of markers, is the page thickness. You don't want your markers or pens to bleed through the page. I look for 160 GSM pages. That's the measure of page thickness, and 160 GSM, which both of these journals are, can withstand almost any marker without bleeding and even some paint. Some other features a lot of journals might have is this elastic strap to keep it closed, a pen holder, the ribbon bookmarks, or a pocket in the back. Wherever you're buying the journal from should list all its features, and you can choose which of those are important to you. In case you want any help, I will have a supplies section in the description below, and I'll link all of my favorite journals and journal brands, ranging in price. You can get perfectly fine notebooks for $25 on Amazon or your local craft store, or you can get really deluxe, beautifully designed journals for $50+ at specialty stationery shops, in person or online. It's totally up to you. These are both from the brand Archer and Olive, which is one that I love. Next is your everyday writing pen. Again, I'll list in the description my favorite pens that I use. This Pentel Energel Clina is my all-time favorite that I write with every day because it has a really fine point and smooth writing, but you don't have to be a pen connoisseur. Any pen you already have and you like writing with is fine. Now let's actually get into how exactly to start your journal. Like I've said, you can make literally any spread you need in your bullet journal, but when you're just starting out, to avoid overwhelm, I think it's best to start simple. So in this video, I want to just focus on 4 main page layouts to get you going. And then as you get comfortable making spreads, you can go crazy with all the other options out there. So flip to the very first blank pages in your journal, and spread number 1 we're going to talk about is the index. I went ahead and already made all the example spreads and filled some of them out so you can kind of see them in use. And then I also did some decorations, so as we go through, we'll talk about the function of each of these spreads and also just some little tips and tricks for starting to decorate. The index is basically your table of contents for your journal. All you need to do to create the index is write your title up top, create 2 columns with this 1 vertical line and then a space for your headers up top, and label the far left column page and the right column content. And as you fill out the pages in your journal, you can record the page number and what is on each page. I think using at least 2 pages to do this is a good amount of space because some spreads will take up more than 1 page but only 1 line in your index. And a lot of journals do come with their pages numbered like this one, but if your pages aren't pre-numbered, that's totally fine. You can just write the numbers in yourself as you go along.
Now, some easy ways to beautify your journal. I like adding little highlights to any headers, and then just a simple border around the title makes it look a little special. And of course, I did the title in a calligraphy font that's a little more bold. You also don't have to get super complex with your drawings to make it look cute. I just did some really simple leaves here and then added a few strips of washi tape in one of the corners. Total time to set up these pages, I think, was maybe like 5 minutes. So next, after your index, comes the future log. And this is basically your annual calendar, or in this case, it's a 6-month calendar. If you're using your journal every single day, a lot of people tend to go through 2 journals in a year. So that's why I've set this up for 6 months. This is the space where you keep track of all your upcoming events, appointments, travel, things like that. And then you can also keep track of tasks or projects or notes that belong in a future month. All you have to do to set up this spread is start with your title at the top, future log. A lot of people also call this page year at a glance, and then create 6 sections between these 2 pages for the 6 months. I prefer having 6 vertical columns, but I know a lot of people also do 3 rows on each page, so you can decide whichever layout works for you. Something I think is really helpful to add to the future log is these mini calendars here for each month. That really helps me visualize the month, see all the weeks it contains, and especially for things like travel, I like to kind of be able to tell when I'm going to be out of town. So once you have your sections for each month and you've written out your calendars, the rest of the space on each area is for writing your events and tasks. I added some examples here. So for in January, if I had a ski trip, I'd write that. You can also write details about anything. So like I wrote the flight times here. I wrote a dentist appointment, and then maybe, for example, I'd want to write the address and the suite of the office location. And then you don't only have to use this for events. If you want to remind yourself to cancel a subscription in next month, you can add that here. If you want to keep track of big project due dates. And then, as you'll see on the next page, whenever we're making our monthly calendars, we'll always flip back to this future log, reference it, and then we'll be reminded of all the events or reminders or tasks that we have for that month. Some easy ways I decorated this spread: again, the border and some strips of washi tape. I also love adding color dots. These are obviously super easy. Anybody can draw them, but I think they look really cute on a spread and especially help with keeping all the colors cohesive. So after the future log is when we get into our monthly log and monthly tasks. I'm doing this example with January, but you don't have to start a bullet journal at the beginning of the calendar year. You can start one whenever, since you're creating it yourself. So this monthly log is the version I use of a monthly calendar, and I actually got this layout from writer Carol. This is the one that he uses for his months as well. But if you want to draw out a calendar each month in your journal, that's also an option too. How the log works is it's super simple to set up. All you do is start with your title, draw 1 line to create these 2 columns. On the left, we have the days of the week and then the dates of the month. And then on the right, we have this whole row to write our events or reminders or whatever we want to keep track of in our monthly log. I also personally like drawing lines to separate the weeks. Again, this is all up to you, so whatever you need to keep track of on a monthly basis, write that down here in your log. Now we're going to get to habit trackers in a little bit when we talk about custom collections, but since we're here, I wanted to go ahead and give you guys a little bonus tip for the easiest habit tracker layout I've ever used. It's super simple to add to your monthly log. All you have to do is make columns for your habits on this far right side. So for example, I can add one right now. Let's say I wanted to track the habit of meditation and drinking enough water. So I might write an M right here to stand for meditation and W to stand for water, and then create a column to separate those. Please excuse my lines. They're not straight at all. And then I might just add a little highlight here for the titles. And then each day I complete that habit, I can do a little heart or X or whatever it would be to signal I completed it. So let's say on the 2nd I meditated and met my water goal, I would add 2 little hearts right there. And that's a great system for a habit tracker, I think, because we're already referencing our monthly log regularly, so it's a reminder to go ahead and update our habits as well. I know that building new habits is a skill all on its own though, and if you're also a person that's eager to learn more on improving skills like habit building, I think you're going to love the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. You guys know I'm a big fan of Skillshare, which is the largest online learning community for creatives with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, productivity, and more. I recently finished their original class, Real Productivity: How to Build Habits That Last, from Thomas Frank. This gave some really helpful insights on building routines that support your long-term goals and an overall productive life. Skillshare has a wonderful library of classes on productivity, a lot of which are tailored towards creatives, but they also have countless other categories. For example, if you're wanting to create a pretty bullet journal, they have lots of class options for improving your art, hand lettering, and calligraphy, and even classes on journaling practices themselves. Whether it's for personal hobbies or your career, Skillshare can help take you to the next level on whatever your goals are. And now is a great time to join this community at the beginning of a new year. If you made any goals for yourself in 2025, maybe that's to build new habits, improve your art or cooking, learn a new skill that will elevate your career, Skillshare probably has a class to help get you there. They've so kindly given me a deal to share with you guys. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So be sure to check that out and get started today. Now moving over to this right page next to our monthly log, this is for the monthly tasks and notes. Tasks is pretty self-explanatory. This is just your monthly to-do list. And then I like having a little notes section for anything that's not necessarily a task I need to check off, but anything I want to remember or record or make a note about. So for the tasks section, let's talk about the key here. A lot of bullet journalers have their own key for the symbols they use, and you can definitely go with whatever system works for you, especially if you already have a system you use. But in case you're looking for inspiration, a great option is to use the symbols that writer Carol came up with to go with the original bullet journal method. He uses a dash for notes and a circle for events. So you can see here I use the dash for my notes here, and the events on my log have the circles by them. And then there's a few different symbols you can use for tasks to track your progress on them. So the bullet point represents a task, and then when you've completed it, you can exit out, turn it into an X. When a task becomes irrelevant, you don't need to do it anymore, you can cross it off. And then these arrows are great for when you're needing to move tasks around. So this right-facing arrow means a task has been migrated, and in bullet journal lingo, that just means it's been moved to the next time period. So on a monthly log, if I've migrated a task, that means I've added it to my February log instead of January. Scheduling a task, which is the left arrow, is similar, but this is more used when you're just ahead of time going ahead and saying, you know what, I'm not gonna do this task during this time period. I'm gonna do it at some point in the future. So I'm gonna schedule it by pushing it back to my future log, and then I know I'll be reminded of it to do it sometime in the future, but I don't have to worry about it right now. And then I like to add a little note when I've rescheduled a task. I like to add move to sometime in spring. So this system is really at the heart of why bullet journaling can really help keep you organized and improve your productivity, because ideally every list of tasks you have in your journal is going to be closed out somehow. So at the end of January, I've created my February log and I'm coming back to look at my task list, and I'm gonna make sure every task has been addressed. So maybe I did end up descaling my espresso machine, so I can cross that off. Maybe I did not get too deep cleaning the house, but I want to do that soon, so I'm gonna go ahead and add it to my February log. So I can go ahead and add that right arrow to symbol that that is in my February log. And then all my bullet points have been addressed. I can't tell you guys how helpful this system is for finally getting over that cycle of unending, unfinished to-do lists. Now moving over to our last core spread for getting started on your bullet journal. This is your weekly or daily pages. This is a simple one that I think is great to start out with. I wrote a title that includes the dates that are included in this spread. And again, I like to draw a little mini calendar because that helps me keep track of where we are in the month. So I highlighted the days that are included in this week. I have a little task section, again, for things I want to specifically get done this week, and then 6 squares for the days of the week and 1 for the weekend. We're going to use the same system as with the monthly task list for our dailies. So I like at the beginning of the week when I set this up to go ahead and fill out at the top of each day any events I have. So these are the bullet points with the circles, and then each day this is your space to use however you need to. For a lot of people, that looks like a to-do list. So I have a list here. Again, at the end of each day, I like to make sure every single bullet point is addressed. But you can also use these daily spaces in whatever way works for you. So a lot of the times I separate out my daily into a work and personal section at the beginning of the day when I'm making my lists. Sometimes if I have a day where a lot of things are scheduled or I need to make certain deadlines, I might use a time tracking chart. So here I labeled the hours 8 through 5, and then if I had an event at certain times or I wanted to time block when I was working on certain tasks. And these are also great spaces to kind of just keep notes throughout the day. You can really use these daily spaces for whatever type of journaling suits your needs. Now we know that we can use bullet journaling for so much more than this. So that's where your custom collections come in. And custom collection is just the official bullet journal term for any special spread that meets a specific need for you. There are so many spread options here and so many variations for how to set them up. So I've just written out a few ideas here. You're welcome to take a screenshot of these if you're looking for ideas and pages to make. But when you're setting up your first bullet journal, before setting out to create every single one of these custom collections, I would recommend starting with these base spreads and then asking yourself these 2 questions to figure out what custom collections might be a good fit for you. I would start out with, what do I need to stay organized and productive? Then you can also ask yourself, what are some things I want to work on? So do some brainstorming to kind of figure out what you want out of your journal, and then format those base spreads to fit your needs there, and then maybe just start with 1 or 2 custom collections to meet any additional needs.
Now you know exactly how to get started with your bullet journal, so now let's talk about something equally as important: how to stay consistent with it. We want bullet journaling to truly be a habit in and of itself, so I want to share some of my most helpful tips for keeping up with it. One of the core techniques when forming new habits is to use cues, and those could be visual or time-based. So for journaling, a visual cue would be keeping your journal in sight all the time. I pretty much never close my bullet journal. It's always open unless I'm tucking it in a bag and taking it with me. But try to keep your bullet journal with you all the time. Take it around the house with you as you go to different rooms, bring it to work, put it in your purse whenever you're running on errands. If it's always around and you're constantly seeing it throughout the day, it's a lot easier to lean over and fill in that appointment that just popped up, or see your to-do list and be reminded to check in with how your day's going and actually update the journal. It's also really helpful to use time cues, so finding a routine where you regularly check in with your journal at routine times. That could look like when you start work each morning or when you get home for the evening. So choose a few specific times throughout the day that you want to check in with your journal, and then as you get used to using it, you don't have to be that strict or have a certain routine, but when you're forming a habit, those time cues are really helpful to get used to using your journal regularly. My next tip is to keep it simple in the beginning. If you start with a ton of spreads and it's overwhelming to set up and too much to keep track of, then you're way more likely to just quit journaling and not keep up with it. But if you just start with a few core spreads, it's an easy setup for you. It's super doable to keep track of that first month or first few months. That's gonna help you build that routine, build that confidence and motivation to keep on going with it, and then you can start adding in the more complex or more fun spreads. This next tip is a big one, and that's to start with spreads that address a need you already have, as opposed to starting with spreads that you saw online and looked cool, which I know I definitely do that too. I see a spread and I'm like, oh, that'd be super fun to have in my journal, and I'm inspired to create it. But in reality, a lot of those spreads might not be something we actually need, and then they kind of become a burden to make and keep up with. So I'd really encourage you to start with those questions we were looking at in the journal and use spreads that actually address those things. Tip number 5 is work on overcoming perfectionism, which is something that I still work on every day in my journal, because I want my journal to look pretty, but I never want that to get in the way of it being a functional tool for me. So if you find yourself getting behind on your journal or not being able to use it because you didn't have time to set up a pretty weekly on Sunday, I would recommend just starting with the bare bones of the spreads and then decorating later. And it's always helpful for me to remember that a bullet journal is not supposed to look perfect. It's supposed to look messy and used and lived in, and that's really what gives it that personalized charm. I guarantee no matter how your journal turns out, you are going to love flipping back through it later. All right, we did it, guys. We talked about why journaling is a great tool for productivity and creativity, the supplies you need to get started, the first spreads you can make in your journal, and tips for staying consistent with it. If you have any other questions about bullet journaling, I would love to answer those in the comments, or if you have your own insights and tips to share, I would love to hear those too. If you found this video helpful, I'd love for you to subscribe and stick around. I share my monthly bullet journal setups on here, as well as other organization, productivity, and creative planning ideas. Thank you guys so much for watching, and now it's your turn. Go grab a notebook and start creating.